You've entered BOOKSTORM with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back to BOOKSTORM Podcast, book lovers. Did you know it's National Book Lovers Day? And we have somebody very special with us here today. So we at BOOKSTORM believe that some of the best authors and some of the best books are based on real life issues, maybe things that we weren't allowed to see, parts of the world we weren't a part of. It's authors like this one we have here with us today that open closed doors for us. They open windows and they let us take a little glimpse inside. And that's what Jake Tapper did with his latest novel, All the Demons Are Here. And Jake, welcome to BOOKSTORM. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much, Chris and Kristen. It's an honor to be here.
So we're very excited that BOOKSTORM Podcast is now loyal listeners in 68 countries, 48 states, over 1,200 cities because of authors like Jake Tapper and book lovers like all of you. Now, I know you all know Jake, as we all do. We're very thankful to him for his correspondence and his news, keeping us up to date on the news. But let me tell you a few things maybe you don't know about him. So as you know, he's the anchor-in-chief Washington correspondent. He anchors an award-winning program called The Lead with Jake Tapper. He hosts CNN's Sunday morning show, State of the Union. And The Lead has won 2 Emmy Awards and been nominated for Best Live News Broadcast. This show covers headlines and concentrates, and I really love this, on bringing stories that aren't found on the front pages, buried leads to the forefront. That's important. But we're here today to talk to him about his writing. We're here today to talk to Jake about being an author. His first 2 books, his debut novel, The Hellfire Club, and the sequel, The Devil May Dance, were instant New York Times bestsellers. Maybe you don't know that he has a nonfiction book that we love. It is The Outpost, an untold story of American valor. It's been critically acclaimed and is a film. So we're super excited to dive down deep into the latest book, All the Demons Are Here. Jake, thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Now, Jake, we are here to talk about All the Demons Are Here. And I give our listeners a short summary of what's going on in the story. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, which is kind of tricky here because this is a thriller and it keeps you guessing. So if you want to add anything at the end, by all means. Now, your thriller transports us to 1977. We are immersed in a time when the public's mind is on UFOs and cults, serial killers, disco, and celebrities like Elvis, and even the infamous Evel Knievel. We pick up with the Martyr family, the subject of your previous 2 novels. And here the focus is on Ike and Lucy. These are the adult children of Senator Charlie and Margaret Martyr. And we find them right in the thick of intrigue and danger. Ike is a U.S. Marine. He's gone AWOL after a military operation went terribly wrong. And now he's trying to stay off the grid. He's working on the pit crew of the stuntmaster Evel Knievel. And we find him at the beginning of the story right in the toughest, roughest dive bar in Montana. His sister Lucy has landed what she hopes will be her dream job as a reporter for a brand new Washington, D.C. tabloid. And right out of the gate, she's breaking stories about a serial killer. But her journalistic ethics are being tested. Now, the wealthy, shady business British family that owns the newspaper is putting all kinds of pressure on her to develop the serial murderer story and maybe sensationalize some headlines. Now, as Ike and Lucy deal with the chaos of what is going on with this national unease in the 1970s, they soon realized that their worlds are not only full of compromises and maybe bad choices, but also danger. These two siblings need each other when everything is on the line. Would you like to add anything, Jake, to that little
No,
summary?
that's a great summary. You did a really good job.
Okay, excellent. Well, if you're ready to brave the storm, Chris is going to kick us off.
Okay.
Okay, so I have to say for our readers, wow. Whether you grew up in the 70s or not, Jake Tapper takes me back to my childhood. I remember the culture shift, the national mood, the tension. In your story, Lucy and Ike, the two senators' kids, are great examples of the impact of national mood upon its youth. I want to talk about the first child, Lucy, and journalism. She believed, and I love this quote, there was nothing more compelling than honesty. So Lucy becomes a journalist. She watched the Sentinel embellish and dramatize stories to increase sales. Her dad warns her, and I love this quote too, the news covers certain stories certain ways, and sometimes those ways are designed to provoke emotion. We saw the news in your story impede investigation, cause uprising, even rioting. And I had to ask you as the author, for Lucy and for all of us in the real world, what is the greatest hurdle remaining for a fair and truthful journalist reporter? Is it possible to simply disperse fact without opinion or emotion? After reading this story, the reader couldn't help but see, hey, fake news has been happening for a long time. And one name kind of stood out to me, Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch. So Murdoch is mentioned in the book, but obviously he's also the character Max Lyon, the fictitious character Max Lyon, who owns the Washington Sentinel, who is the patriarch of this British family that is in the book that Lucy falls in with. Max Lyon is very directly based on Rupert Murdoch, and not just being somebody from abroad who comes to the United States to become a very successful media magnate, but somebody who imports a type of journalism, tabloid journalism, that is very much with us today. And I don't just mean with the New York Post and the Fox, which are obviously Murdoch owned, but also just the sensationalism of media in general. And, you know, this is a tension that we all live with, whether we're news consumers or just people, the tension between flash and substance, the tension between what's provocative and what's important. These are decisions that we all make in our day-to-day lives when we decide what to read, what to watch, what to listen to. And for Lucy, she is dealing with these issues in a very sinister way, in a very overblown way, in a very dramatized way, because it's fiction, obviously. But even if you aren't compelled as a writer who works for a Washington, D.C. tabloid, and you're not covering a serial killer and your life isn't threatened, which has all happened to Lucy, these are issues we all deal with. And I certainly have dealt with them as a journalist, but also just as anybody who reads or listens to the news on TV or the radio or in podcasts also deals with these issues.
Is this news being dispersed and more acceptable because for some reason as a society, we are ripe and open and looking for sensationalism and drama?
We are. And, you know, when I did the research for this book, one of the things I realized while researching this book, and maybe this will resonate with you guys, is that I realized that my childhood fear of killer bees was entirely Rupert Murdoch's fault. We had been told in the 70s and the 80s that there was this swarm of killer bees coming from South America, and pretty soon they would be with us and they would be a big threat. And they are not any deadlier than regular bees, is the truth. They are more aggressive, but they are not a particular threat to anyone other than maybe livestock or flowers. But this was something that when Murdoch bought his first newspapers in America, the San Antonio Express and the San Antonio News, he brought this tabloid sensibility, and he covered killer bees like this was a clear and present danger to the nation. And the rest of the country kind of followed suit. And there was specials on TV, and there was an Irwin Allen disaster movie called The Swarm. And the truth is, it was nonsense, but it was also very successful. And the San Antonio News, which I think was the afternoon paper in San Antonio, when all the afternoon papers in the early 1980s were closing down. Young people out there won't even know what I'm talking about, but there was a morning paper, and this is before the internet. There was a morning paper, and then in the afternoon, there'd be an afternoon paper about everything that happened since the morning paper. And the afternoon papers basically started shutting down all over the country. And I found a New York Times story from 1982 or 83 talking about how the San Antonio News had bucked that trend, was very successful because of this steady diet of murder and mayhem and freak shows and killer bees. So yes, this sensationalism and desire for it has been with us for quite a long time.
Mhm. It's interesting. You know, we don't readily see it because it's not our career. This is your career. You're exposed to it. And it's like I said in the beginning, it's great books like this, fiction like this, that open doors and windows, let us peer inside in areas that in some of our everyday lives, we don't get to see. That was pretty cool. Thank you.
Jake, Lucy talks about writing the story of a skilled demagogue, turning the perceived grievances of a mob into a violent insurrection. She says, call it a cautionary tale. Let's talk a little bit about that scenario. Is the demagogue most responsible for the activities of the mob, or does everyone bear responsibility in that situation? Because your characters wrestled with this very issue.
So the demagogue in the book is Evel Knievel. And the book imagines an alternate reality where Evel Knievel runs for president as kind of a stunt to get attention. And the truth is, in 1977, Evel Knievel's career was a little bit on the skids. His stunt jumps were not drawing the same kind of interest that they used to be. ABC wasn't using them on Wide World of Sports that year. He released a film, and it didn't do very well. It was kind of a flop, starring him as himself. And so I just imagined, well, what if he ran for president? Because it's not such a crazy idea. In 1972, some local booster types in Montana did a fake Evel Knievel for president campaign. And for anybody who's an eBay collector, you can occasionally find an Evel Knievel 1972 for president button. And he was a guy that had a certain ability to capture media attention, shoot from the hip, not get in trouble, seem like he was a very quintessentially American character, kind of an outlaw, bad boy, charmer, salesman type. And that DNA obviously lives on in Donald Trump, whether you like him or you don't like him. He has that salesmanship, that ability. So in my book, this stunt campaign has a lot of followers, and some of them have real grievances and real problems. There are a number of Vietnam veterans living in the woods that Ike falls in with and then goes with as they follow on this convoy of sorts. Of Evel Knievel crossing the country. And some of them their grievances are less real or less based in reality. And for all of them, Evel Knievel becomes the individual in whom they invest their hopes for recognition, for their problems to be solved. And that's something we see with politicians all the time, not just with Donald Trump, obviously, but it's something we see with politicians all the time. But it is, as your question notes, something that I wanted to explore. How much of this is because of the the leader or the demagogue? How much of this is because of the people following them? How responsible is the demagogue or the leader? And these are just questions that I grapple with, that you as the reader can figure out for yourself what you think.
Yeah, and first of all, I like your pun about his career being on the skids.
Right.
Clever. But you really did leave that up to the reader to start thinking like the characters. Does this change my assessment of this person? Seeing the damage that follows, should I start looking at this person differently? There's less of the glitter and the charisma and more of the underlying narcissistic tendencies we're starting to see.
Yeah.
So it was good. Your characters, again, I don't want to give anything away, but they went through that kind of analysis.
Yeah, and just for anybody out there who is worried about caricaturing the stand-in for Murdoch or the stand-in for Trump, the Evel Knievel character, or anybody in the mob, I really tried not to. I really tried to get into their brains and explain the world from their points of view. Obviously, when you finish the book, I'm not going to spoil it, but obviously there are clear bad guys in the book. There is a serial killer, and there is a whodunit at play here. But generally speaking, I think the Vietnam veterans in the book are some of the most sympathetic characters in the entire book. They legitimately have actual grievances with the country and with how they're being treated, and I do not see them as bad guys. I see them as people who need help, and maybe they made a bad decision as to who could provide them with help, but no one else was even offering.
Yeah, remember that period. And really, it ties into my next question. So the other senator's child is Ike. And I wanted to talk about Ike in politics. Now, I have a few quotes that I loved. The first one is, when you grow up around politicians in DC, you quickly learn there's a big difference between truth and marketing. Ike's mother said, the folly of leadership was that men succeeded to the point that they inevitably removed from their circle anyone who kept them from self-destruction. Wow, there's some truth there. Ike said, to state the obvious, governments lie, to insulate the public from ugly truths and to shelter themselves. So the character Ike fled politics. He joins the Marines, thinking about the Vietnam vets here. He ended up surviving a situation in Beirut that he was never allowed to reveal. And I had to ask you again as the author, what is the greatest hurdle in remaining an honest politician? Is it possible to gain so much power and notoriety and not become so narcissistic? And we see this, and this is where it gets scary, that you forget your original cause. All that matters is you shine, you're the hero, you're the leader, you're the center, and you forget why you started.
Yeah, these are issues that I've been grappling with the series, with all three books. Charlie and Margaret in the first book, The Hellfire Club, takes place in 1954, and Charlie comes down and he wants to do good. He's a World War II hero, and he wants to be a good congressman to help people. And what he goes through in that first book is what I've seen a lot of people go through in Washington, which is they make little compromise after little compromise to achieve what they want to achieve. But before they know it, they're up to their neck in compromises, and they've forgotten why they were there. The second book explores The Devil May Dance, who people get in bed with in order to achieve what they want to achieve. Not literally in bed necessarily, but dancing with the devil. And it's about the Kennedys getting in bed with Sinatra. It's about Sinatra getting in bed with the mob. It's about Charlie getting in bed with the Rat Pack. And it's all about who you're willing to be with in order to achieve what you want to achieve, and whether that rubs off on you. And this book, because Ike is the most cynical of everybody in the family. Ike is the one who is the most disillusioned, and in that way is a stand-in for all of us, post-Watergate, post-Vietnam, but also in the era that we're living in, where it's difficult to believe in any leaders. I wanted to just voice that skepticism, and that the passage you just read from is Ike talking about why he's willing to believe in UFOs, because why would the government be telling us the truth about it? They tell us, they lie about everything else, but it could be about any topic, really. And the disillusionment that I felt so much when researching this book is also disillusionment that I feel among the voters today when I cover politics, and it's understandable. It's, you know, politicians do lie. Now, Margaret, Ike and Lucy's mom, Charlie's wife, her philosophy about men, successful men, rise to the level where they remove everyone from their inner circle who can tell them when they're messing up and keep them from self-destructing. That's an observation that I've made because I've seen it a million times. And it's one of the reasons why it's important for people to have around them friends and colleagues, bosses and underlings who can say, hey, that's a bad idea. Because if you don't, then you end up self-destructing. And I've seen it happen in the media with Brian Williams. I've seen it happen in politics, too many examples to name. And it is important for all, and it's not just about politics, it's for car dealers and authors and anybody, to make sure that you stay grounded in who you are and what you want to be.
And we, you know, listen, so both of these characters, Ike and Lucy, this is why the reader loves a great story. We could see ourselves inside each of these characters. Whether you grew up in the 70s or not, you just lived through some quite insanity going on in this country between COVID-19 and politics and social unrest and everything that we went through. We see a little bit of ourselves in each of these characters, and that's why it makes it real to us. I heard a phrase a couple months ago. I heard it before, but it hit me stronger than ever. If you find that you're the smartest person in the room, get out of the room.
Right, you're in the wrong room. Yeah, no, I definitely feel that way. And I'm glad you feel that way about Ike and Lucy, because I mean, I love them. But, you know, one of the things about Ike and Lucy, and especially Charlie, their dad, maybe not so much Margaret, who's pretty perfect, but is that Ike and Lucy are very flawed, but in a way that I tried to make understandable. I mean, Ike is disillusioned, and that's what he's dealing with. He's disillusioned with his friends. He's disillusioned with his sister. He's disillusioned with his government and the military. Lucy is ambitious and wants to do good, but also finds her desire to be successful getting in the way of her ideals. And that's something I think we all can all can identify with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jake, we've been talking about, as a nation, collectively experiencing certain things, and you really nailed it, because I remember the killer bees. I remember being afraid of sharks because of Jaws,
Right?
and the serial murders and UFOs. But it did shape how a certain generation thought about certain things in some respects. And I was wondering if you thought whether the era of a collective experience is over, because we are very diverse in some of our thoughts, opinions, and even facts now. Or do you think we still go through those collective experiences?
I think there are collective experiences. They might be a little less limited. I mean, a little bit more limited to different groups. But for example, I'll just tell you, so I have a 15-year-old daughter, and she is a Swiftie. She is a huge fan of Taylor Swift. And that is a big community of mainly young women, but also just women, and some men too, I'm guessing. But that is a group of Americans, millions of them, who love Taylor Swift, who love her music. She speaks to them. Then there's my son. He's a gamer. He's 13. He does a lot of gaming. He does Minecraft. He's living in these worlds. He's talking to his friends while he's playing these games on Discord. And that is another community too. And I mean, that will be something that, 30 years from today, 40 years from today, or whatever, that generation will be talking about that the same way that you and I, remember being afraid of killer bees or quicksand. I don't know why, but like my generation was convinced that there was quicksand everywhere you went, in the
Yeah.
world. You
Land
had
of
to
the
watch
lost.
out for quicksand. You were going to stumble on it and you were going to die. And for, I don't know if it was just like we all got hit by the same nature reporters that decided to sex things up a little with the natural disasters and the quicksand. I've never seen quicksand. I'm 54 years old. I've been all over the world. I've been to war zones. I've never seen quicksand in my life. So, I mean, maybe that will be the quicksand of the future, the Minecraft world.
That's hysterical.
I think it's from Land of the Lost and Gilligan's Island. And because we all
possible.
watched those shows, they had a quicksand episode.
But I also remember nature specials, and like National Geographic had a magazine for kids called National Geographic World.
Yep.
And I remember there was just I'm sure they were just trying to educate kids about nature, but there was just a lot of natural disaster coverage. And so I was living in Philadelphia in a townhouse, terrified that I was going to drown in a flood. And I'm not going to drown in a flood in a townhouse in Philadelphia, but just, sometimes too much education is a bad thing.
Yeah. It's fun to look back on those things from our childhood and see that we do have collective memory. COVID-19 did this for us, where we were collected, whether we believed that it was as dangerous as it was or not. I want to hope and believe that it band us together more than it drew us apart. But I loved everything in this book. I loved how you drew every cultural trend with politics, with the news media. I love these little footnotes that you had in here for our readers.
Those are not mine. Those are Lucy's. Those are Lucy footnotes.
Because
Lucy's a footnoter.
So the cool thing about these footnotes, it wasn't your typical factual footnote. It was opinionated, sometimes quirky and funny. And I wanted to bring this one up. So at one point there was a footnote because there was no 13th floor in the building. And the footnote says, the refusal to label 13th floors as what they are is truly the stupidest thing in the world. Thinking of luck as a force you can control by, say, avoiding the number 13 is contradictory. And for another thing, if you call the 13th floor the 14th floor, it's still the 13th floor.
Well, this is Lucy. Lucy is a know-it-all, and I use these footnotes not only to have fun, but also as a character trait. Ike's chapters have no footnotes. They have curses and they have rock and roll references and Elvis references. Lucy's chapters have footnotes because she is very smart and she's very funny about her intelligence and how right she is and how wrong everybody else is. And she's, by the way, and she's right about the 13th floor. That is stupid.
It is ridiculous. And Kristen, you like the Led Zeppelin.
Oh, yes. I was like, is this a song that I don't know?
No, it's a fake Led Zeppelin. So I learned this. So when I wrote my Afghanistan book, I had a scene where these soldiers were driving their Humvees and they were blasting AC/DC, Shook Me All Night Long. And the publisher said, you can only quote one line of that song. And I said, why? It happened. They were listening to the song. They said one line of the song or else we get sued. And I tried it again with the first novel, The Hellfire Club, and they said one line. And, you're trying to set a mood and a time, and only being able to quote one line of a song in 1954 really gets in the way of that. So for The Devil May Dance, which is about Sinatra, and The Devil May Dance is a song. It's a song that he sings at the Oscars. It's nominated for an Academy Award. I included the entire song, and the lawyers called me and they said, you're doing, like we told you can only do one line, and you have the entire song. It's a big climactic scene in that book at the 1962 Oscars. Sinatra's singing this song, and there's all this stuff going on behind him in the rafters. And I said, aha, but this is not a real song. I made up the song, and I made up two other songs in that book. And then I realized, this is the solution to the problem, is you just have to make up the song and tell people it's a Led Zeppelin song, and they'll think it's a real Led Zeppelin song if you can write it skillfully enough. So All the Demons Are Here is at the beginning of the book is a Robert Plant is singing. It's not a real song. I made it up, but it's not that tough to fake fake it as long as I don't have to sing it. As long as I don't have to sing it, I can fake it okay.
Well, I believed it. And Kristen's the one who called it to my attention. That was ingenious. We just loved it. I'm going to tidy it up here for our listeners. Pick this book up. Jake Tapper, All the Demons Are Here. You are going to love it. You're going to find something out about the 70s, even about our culture and time period today. You may even find a little something about yourself in this book. And in the meantime, you're going to want to connect with Jake Tapper. You can find him at jaketapper.com. He's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I've got to close because in the lead, they say that Jake Tapper talks about, quote, stories that matter. Well, guess what? The Bookstorm hashtag is books that matter.
Oh, nice.
And you belong right here with us. Thank you for coming.
This is so much fun, Chris and Kristen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a fantastic interview with Jake Tapper, and talking about All the Demons Are Here has just brought up so many memories, so many things that, as you pointed out, we not only experienced in the 70s, but we are seeing play out on the world stage today.
Mm-hmm.
One of those themes I thought was really interesting was this whole idea of, government mistrust. And of course, that was shaken. Our foundations were shaken in terms of our trust in the government with Watergate and then subsequent things that happened. And now it almost seems like that is a weekly, monthly occurrence where there's some kind of a question about somebody in the government. What do you think about that issue? Are we like immune to it now because it's so prevalent?
I think we're smarter. I think we need to question, and we need to realize that the government is filled with just people. And our deep dive with Jake showed us that people get caught up in their own selfish goals. They forget what their genuine cause was. They get lost in the idea of succeeding in victory. So I'd like to think our closer examination and investigation into what is true news and what is fake news, we've come a long way. I don't know if we're there yet because we're bombarded with social media ridiculousness, but I think we're a little smarter. Do you?
I do. And I also think it's a little harder to get away with things because now we have cell phones. We have all kinds of devices and ways to pinpoint where people were on a certain day. I mean, social media has its downsides, but then there's upsides in terms of keeping people accountable. So, and I also loved your point that you brought up about as people rise higher and higher, they eliminate the people around them who are saying no. And, you and I have talked about this in the past, where if you are operating in an echo chamber, you're in trouble.
If the truth is, if you really want to succeed, you've got to have people around you who are telling you when you need to edit, when you need to change, when you need to learn and grow. And it's a tough thing to hear whatever your job is or your cause or your book or your film, your baby's ugly. I don't want to know my baby's ugly, but it is. We can make it cuter, but you've got to do a few things. You got to cut the hair. You got to change the clothes. The true successful people have got to hear the bad news, the hard news with the good news. And I wanted to ask you something. So this hit me. So I grew up in the 70s, small town, Western New York called Orchard Park. Now, here's what we were doing then. We wore silver wristbands that had POW and MIA names on them. It was like a fashion trend, but we wore it around and we would remember that name and show each other the name. We listened to different kinds of music. We didn't write the song. We didn't choose the song. It was presented to us. This is what was on our AM radio. That's what we had. Then we had FM. We thought we were really cool.
Stereo.
Yeah, we had bell bottoms, ridiculous clothes. There's a lot of classic fashion that has endured generations. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but bell bottoms really haven't. They kind of make their little comeback, but it's not that classic style. So I sat there and I thought, to what extent are we being fed what we love, told what we love, and to what extent do we really get to choose? It's a tough one.
I think that's a great question. I mean, I'm sure it's a little of both. And, how you respond to the things that are presented to you, I think are also very important in our development. For example, 1976, we were talking about the bicentennial. And this is what I loved about his story, because it was just an everyday thing that his characters were doing. But that is what people were doing and thinking about. I remember that vividly. But like the bicentennial was a very big deal. It's always instilled in me a very strong sense of patriotism. He talked about National Geographic's magazine World for young people. Well, I had a subscription that somebody bought me. And I'm telling you, that is why I'm an environmental attorney. It's why I care about the environment, was because I was very much shaped by what National Geographic was putting out there. Now, I'm not saying they did it in a malicious way or an incorrect way, but the point is they chose to focus on that, and that shaped a lot of the way that I thought about the world. What do you think?
Kristen, but back then our resources were very limited. I just said we at one point had 3 channels on our television.
That's right.
And we had the radio. The radio was huge. Then we could go to the mall and we could buy 45s. Sometimes we couldn't afford the whole album, but you could buy a 45. I think a little bit of both. In answer to my own question, I think we are fed what we are craving because of the national tension, mood, culture shift. We are fed. We also reject or choose what comforts us during those times, what truth we need to believe in. Maybe back then we needed to believe in UFOs. Maybe today we still do. Maybe there's some part of us that has to believe in quicksand or whatever it is. But I think it is one thing is not predisposed upon the other. They're multi-interacting, what we choose and what we are being given. That's a whole study in itself. But I just love this book by Jake Tapper. It was a pleasure talking to him. I got to tell for our readers, in the back of the book, he gives a chapter by chapter outline. He's done a lot of research on this. And whether you grew up in the 70s or not, you're going to really relate to this book. Just adored it. So we're going to leave you, as always, with a few storm predictions to pique your interest, or maybe you'd like to read ahead. We've got Rebecca Yaros coming to us with Fourth Wing, Deneen Milner, One Blood, Jacqueline Michard, A Very Inconvenient Scandal, James Rowlands, Tides of Fire, Michael Ledgewood, The Girl in the Vault, and John Mars, The Vacation.
And listeners, we want to thank you for sharing our social media, for listening in, for contacting us. We have listeners in 68 countries and 48 states across the United States. We are growing, and we thank you for that. These interviews are the kinds of conversations that we think are important to the national consciousness. So we just love that you're tuning in and spreading that word. Of course, stay on the radar with us. You can find us at bookstormpodcast.com, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, which is now X, and TikTok. And if you'd like to see us in person, or of course see any of our amazing authors, you can find us on YouTube. Just search for Bookstorm and podcast, and we should come right up. Of course, until the next time, listeners, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.